Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Deborah Elkazabuhoff. I'm the director of the Creative Art Therapy Counseling Program at Hofstra University. We would like to welcome everyone from around the country and around the world to our annual virtual conference, The Power of Creativity During a Global Pandemic and Preparing for the Aftermath. This is session 6. Embodied movement in a frozen world. And I'm going to be turning it over to our presenters, Ryann Catapano and Nicole Patino.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Hello, I am Ryann. I am a licensed creative arts therapist and a registered dance movement therapist. I'm so glad to be here with you all today. I currently work at South Oaks Hospital. That's how I know my co-presenter, Nicole. And I have recently just started working with this great new private practice, Start Creative Arts Therapy.
And my name is Nicole. I'm currently a student at Long Island University in the counseling department. And I also am a certified yoga instructor in the Vinyasa lineages. And I currently work at South Oaks Hospital with Ryann in the recreation department, where I do a lot of mindfulness-based groups and teach yoga.
Awesome.
For our presentation here.
Yeah, so welcome. So we'll just do a quick run through of some of our learning objectives for today. We will start by defining what embodied movement is. We will give you a brief intro on yoga and dance movement therapy. We will explore the different impacts of COVID-19 on mental health, and we will then define embodied movement for well-being. We will show you embodied movement in our work at South Oaks Hospital. And lastly, we'll offer you embodied movement resources within our community.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to start our presentation by defining embodied movement first. But before we'll define embodied, we're going to define mindful because it's a bit easier and more clearly defined in our field of counseling. So we have two quotes up on the screen, one from Jon Kabat-Zinn, who is the founder of mindfulness-based stress reduction, and one from Marshall Linehan, who is the founder of dialectical behavior therapy. So by Jon Kabat-Zinn, he says, mindfulness is paying attention in a particular way on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. Marshall Linehan similarly says mindfulness is observing, describing, and participating non-judgmentally in the moment and effectively. So as you can see here, the definitions are very similar, and a big component of these definitions is enhancing awareness. So I'll bring in embodiment, which is a bit trickier, but when we're talking about the mind and body, we can look at it through two different philosophies. So one is the dualistic perspective, and the second is the non-dualistic perspective. And with the dualistic perspective, that is the mind and body as separate. So mental functions are separate from the physical ones. And when the mind and the body are separate, we're looking at them from two different perspectives, where maybe through when we need help with any stress, we see a therapist. And when we need help with something like stomach pain, we'll go and we'll see a stomach doctor. Whereas in the non-dualistic perspective, we're looking at mental functions as inseparable from physical functions. So this is a more holistic way of looking at things, where the mind and the body are unified, and the mental functions and who we are cannot be referenced without our body. So from the dualistic perspective, there, we have the approach of the theory of mind. And so I have Rene Descartes here. I think, therefore I am, because this is the perspective where we're looking at who we are from a mental perspective, that our thoughts create who we are. From the non-dualistic perspective, we have an approach called the paradigm theory, and that's cognition extending beyond the mental energy. So who are we besides the mind? When we add the body into it, we have the sensory components, and so it's a more grounded perspective. And this is where interoception comes in. So interoception is the ability to understand our inner environment and the experience that we're having inside of us. So it's looking at things like hunger cues and satiety cues, looking at how tired we are, looking at our emotional state, and then putting everything together into a single component and creating the narrative of who we are in a single moment. And then we have the concept of the body memory, the body narrative, and that is, it's based in memory as well, However, it's the story that we tell ourselves and how we hold our bodies in this world. And a lot of the way in which we go about and hold the body is within the familial, the social, and the cultural environments in which we're raised. And so when we have a lot of stress in our lives, we might begin to feel physical pain. So this is a connection between the body and the mind. Up here, we have a picture. It was a study done, I believe, in 2013, where they asked people from different countries in Asia and Europe, and they had individuals create and draw where they hold emotions in their body. And so generally they found that everyone felt emotions universally in the same places within their body. So it showed that there was a universality to these emotions, that besides just the subjective mental component, there was an actual physical component and physiology going on. Why it's important to movement is because movement directly engages that physiology.
So here we offer you a comparison of what mindful movement is and embodied movement. So the mindfulness is the consciousness really and the awareness, while embodiment is more of the intuitive, less measurable experience. So in a clinical sense, the term mindful movement might be utilized when an individual who is recovering from, say, an eating disorder makes a decision to exercise, but then while at the same time respecting the amount of energy that is required for his or her body to maintain health. So this movement is also embodied if the individual is fully present, and fully feeling within. Nicole will give us a little bit of an overview now of yoga.
So what exactly is yoga? Yoga is a broad cultural term. The word yoga itself comes from the Sanskrit word to yoga, and it means to unite. So we're uniting the body, the mind, and the spirit. The Yoga Sutras is a particular text that was written about 2,000 years ago by a man named Patanjali. And in that book specifically, he outlines exactly what yoga is. So when we think of yoga in our culture, sometimes we tend to think of the physical poses. And that is just one component of 8 more when it comes to defining what exactly yoga is. So, and on the next slide, we will break that down. So when we study yoga nowadays, there are 4 different components that we can look at, and we do it through Patanjali's 8 subjects. So with ethics, there are the yamas and the niyamas. That's the pink pieces. So when we look into doing research, what we find is that by practicing the yamas and the niyamas, we increase empathy and self-compassion. So they're all the moral constraints, they're the ethics behind the yoga practice. Then we have the physical activity, which is the asana and the poses. So we might look, when it comes to research, at the impact of doing a back bend versus the impact of doing a restorative pose and how it responds with the nervous system. Then there is breath control, and that's individually researching the inhalation, the exhalation, and holding your breath, and all of the components and the strategies that are involved in mindfulness when it comes to breath control. And then there's the meditation component, and it can be broken down into 4 different sections as well. So the pratyahara is turning inward, so that's introspection. There's dharana, and that's more of the concentration part of the meditation, and it might look like focused attention, so something like a visualization, or something like listening to the sound of a tone, where your attention is based onto an object itself. Whereas the dhyana, the actual meditation, is more of the flow of the experience that you're having while you're meditating. So it's that unbroken attention to the present moment. And then there's samadhi, which in counseling can be likened to Abraham Maslow and self-actualization, or even in a clinical sense, brain integration and the ability to take all the other components and connect it internally and then grow and develop from it. So here we have a verse from the Yoga Sutras. It's the 2nd chapter, verse number 46, Satira Sukham Asana. And it's Patanjali's definition of what a yoga pose is. So we're going to break it down because something interesting about it is that it kind of explains the Western science that we're looking into now, but it was written 2000 years ago, so they didn't have the science at the time to explain it. So when it comes to the word satira, it can be interpreted or translated as steadiness or stability, firmness. And then breaking down the word sukha, we have the prefix suk, which can be translated as good or easy. And next we have the suffix of ka, which can be translated as space. So in total, sukha would be like an easy space. So directly translated, Satir Sukham Asana would mean steady and easy is the posture. But when we look at it nowadays in in the science and that's coming up as we research yoga, we're learning to apply it to the nervous system. And Satira might be like into the sympathetic nervous system where there is activity. And then Sukha might be associated with the parasympathetic nervous system where there's the relaxation part. So within the yoga practice, there's a balance between the sympathetic and the activity and the parasympathetic and the rest. And you might see that throughout a class.
Thank you, Nicole. Now I will offer a brief overview of dance movement therapy, and just here are some images really how dance movement therapy is brought to life. So here, as defined by the American Dance Therapy Association, dance movement therapy, or DMT as I will reference to it in this presentation, is a psychotherapeutic use of movement and dance to support intellectual, emotional, and motor functions of the body. So furthermore, this finally puts this on the map for us as creative arts therapists, where DMT looks at the correlation between movement and emotion. So dancing can really be viewed as an organized, carefully planned art form, as well as an organic and free-range sense of self-expression, with also the beautiful incorporation of music as well. So the idea of movement, on the other hand, incorporates more of the body dynamic focus and an opportunity to highlight more diverse engagement, where we explore different breathing patterns, emotional and physical growth, and even emotional and physical transformation. Here I'd like to just offer a brief overview as well of the history of dance movement therapy and how it really evolved over time. So our founder, Ryann Chase, was a natural born dancer and early vaudeville performer. She started her career with her husband performing in and directing their own performance company. However, as time progressed, their financial support to run this company declined and their relationship eventually dissolved. So this really forced Ryann Chase to get creative into how she was going to continue her career with this work. She later began working in educational-based settings where she quickly learned that children and adolescents, they love to move, but their initial intention wasn't to then pursue a career in dance. So again, she had to then get creative as to how she was going to bring her experience of dance to this world. And this is where it was a turning point for movements because it shifted to be less technique focused and more about the individualized abilities and interests. This allowed for her work to travel through the community-based programs, hospital settings, and even school systems. And this was also welcomed, what I found was so interesting, this was welcomed in a time where psychotropic medication was not so widely used for mental health treatment. So this less conventional approaches were really welcomed. And here, oops, I will go back one. Okay, great. So then here is where the title of one of Chase's groups, when she became the first full-time dance movement therapist in the US as of 1947, one of the main titles of her groups was Dance for Communication. And this was how we learn how to use your body to notice your own needs and then be able to communicate them to others. Also in Chase's formations in her group therapy settings, she used a circle formation. So as further defined by two refined dance movement therapy researchers, Krimpala and Panifer, I want to just offer this quote. The powerful symbol of the circle is used to generate a feeling of totality, wholeness, and completeness throughout the therapeutic process. And this became a major foundation of Chase's work. Chase helped really pave the way for creative arts therapies in the mental health system, and it honored every part of the person, which I want to highlight as well. It was the mind, the body, the spirit, and that's really what put embodied work on the map for us. Here I wanted to just also highlight some of the interventions that I like to utilize in my dance movement therapy sessions. Here you will see on the left, authentic movement developed by another pioneer, Mary Whitehouse. Within this ideology or intervention, authentic movement is an improvisation-based technique, and it allows the mover to more deeply connect with their innermost experiences, say their emotions and their memories. And within this intervention, the mover's eyes are closed to decrease the external stimulation mostly, but also then to connect within. This will also then allow for the participants that are present in the space to witness this mover, and also they keep their eyes open to keep that mover safe as well in the space. So validation is a huge part of this experiential, while also learning to become more comfortable in one's own body and to strengthen self-awareness and self-expression. So here with mirroring, another intervention developed by Mary and Chase. As one individual moves, the other participants present replicate the movements shared in real time, but the key is that they are not done so with words or sounds. So this intervention also is an improvisational based technique, connecting to one's inner self and expressing them outwardly to then be embodied by others. This exercise directly explores empathy for others and mimics taking a walk in someone else's shoes. Lastly, movement choir. The pioneer of this intervention, Rudolf Laban, believed that experiencing the power and joy in community through dance was essential to human function. So finding somatic empathy to one another through connection with ourselves in a collective spirit of shared movement was the main theme. This promotes connection also by energy and space. So moving with others can create an opportunity to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. And that was also another foundational factor for Laban himself. And the word choir, as we know, incites coming together. We know choirs to be singing. So as a choir sings together to create sound, in movement, we all move together to create an image and then to create a flow. On the right here, I've identified how dance movement therapy is also utilized with a variety of different populations and also diagnoses as well.
Okay, so bring in now COVID-19. So this is something that we've all experienced, the pandemic itself, and it caused a lot of changes in our community, some for the better, some for the worse, but we listed some psychosocial stressors here. So initially there was the panic of the new virus and how, it was new for all of us and we did not know what to expect in the initial stages. So March, April, and with that came the toilet paper craze. Right. And then there was distancing and there was isolation, which also caused a lot of stress for a lot of people. In addition to the distancing, there was also the increased use of digital technology and the Zoom fatigue, and also having to adjust to being online for 8 hours a day, sometimes 10. There was the lack of structure and the lack of a schedule. For some people, there was unemployment, and with that, also a financial burden. For other people, it was adjusting to working from home, as well as maybe adjusting kids to homeschooling. And in addition to that, there was increased death in the hospital setting and increased death just all around us, and an inability to maybe grieve appropriately. So a lot of bereavement, but on top of that, a lack of being able to get the support that might have been needed and attend funerals. There was increased tension within the home and also an increased or a decreased lack of physical touch between family members. And all of this combined created a lot of mental health distress. And what's so prominent about that is because at the same time that increased mental health distress was happening, we lost access to mental health services.
So here we want to offer a variety of different statistics that were defined by the World Health Organization. It was clear that the field of mental health noted reduced access to mental health services, and this reduction was not just isolated to the US, of course we know, but also globally. So according to the World Health Organization, the insufficient quantities of available staff due to the high amounts of sickness, also the transportation restrictions that prevented people from getting to services even if they were actually functional in the community, and a lack of PPE to deliver services were all considered contributing factors. The following statistics were taken
Yeah,
from
it's
the
all
World
day.
Health Organization.
But it's Eastern time, so it'll be done at.
So 93% of countries reported the access to mental health services were impeded. So in this study, 120 out of 130 countries were actually included to give a clear picture. More specifically, 67% of these countries noted reduced access to psychotherapy services. 35% of these countries noted reduced access to emergency services. So say something like a seizure could not be tended to in a timely manner, let alone at all. And 75% of these countries noted reduced access to services in school and at work. So we saw the impact trickling down to students who needed guidance counselors to help with assignments, or even assistance escalating all the way up to big businesses. So really, to summarize, I think we know a lot of people were overall impacted by this. And these statistics are critical in the assessment of effects of COVID-19 because it only helps further validate the experiences, and then hopefully this can help us plan moving forward what we need. Here on the left, you will see a variety of different statistics as well. We researched this from the CDC's study with 5,500 different participants. And in a study conducted by the CDC, there was evaluation bringing these things to life, which I'm sure we're not really in shock. Each area, anxiety here, depression, suicidal ideation, substance use, and the statistic of overdoses increased roughly over 18% over time. And Nicole here will explore a little bit about different diagnoses and their impacts as well.
So extending beyond anxiety and depression, we did see research in post-traumatic stress disorder, in eating disorders, in personality disorders, and in neurological disorders. So we did see through the research an increase in post-traumatic stress disorder, both COVID related, especially when it came to the healthcare workers, but also an increase in post-traumatic symptoms in those recovered from post-traumatic stress disorder, not even related to COVID. When it came to the field of eating disorders, initially, before we had COVID testing, the clinicians in the field of eating disorders had trouble distinguishing between symptoms of COVID and symptoms of the eating disorder itself. Some symptoms of malnutrition are headaches, labored breathing, a lot of fatigue. And in addition to that, individuals with eating disorders tend to have lower body temperatures. And so because of that, they may not show a fever response. So this was first the initial fear in the field of eating disorders. Throughout the course of the year, research was done. Some individuals found that COVID did increase the risk of relapse due to a lack of availability of food, due to not being able to visit the doctor to get their weight checked, and just due to general isolation and hiding behaviors. Other people found that COVID-19 increased their motivation for recovery because they were able to acknowledge their health and the importance of being proactive at this time. When it came to borderline personality disorders, we did see an increased longing for attachment, increased fears of abandonment, increased health anxiety in the general population, but specifically when it comes to borderline personality disorder, these individuals struggle with coping strategies. So at a time when everyone's coping strategies were limited, we couldn't go to the gym, we couldn't see friends, we all felt that increase in stress. But for these individuals specifically, it also increases self-destructive behaviors, increases suicidality. So it caused a general risk for this population. And then there is research showing a link between COVID-19 and being diagnosed with the illness and a risk for psychosis. And they're not sure of the mechanisms yet behind that, but they're thinking it has to do with the toxins and the virus getting through the blood-brain barrier. Thank you, Ryan.
Okay.
So overall, to summarize the last couple of slides, stress disembodies us. And this is where movement comes in, because movement brings us into the present moment. To be able to pop up into a warrior two pose, to be able to dance around, takes being in the present moment, and it takes feeling your body, it takes balance, and all of this puts us back together, kind of brings us home when we feel fragmented. So now we're going to review the positive outcomes of movement for mental health. We found a study based in 2011 where it took individuals diagnosed with severe mental illness and they took part in a program that utilized both yoga and dance movement therapy. And it was a qualitative study. So the individuals were interviewed, but what the individual stated was that there was reduced stress reduction and also reduced anxiety. In addition to reducing the stress and the anxiety, we saw increased relaxation. There was also increased self-awareness in 3 different domains. So increased ability to identify yourself. So a stronger sense of self, increased ability to identify thoughts, and increased ability to identify feelings as well. And then overall, just increased empathy for other people and understanding and being aware of the experience of others. And so to bring that piece back to awareness, we have, again, that the term interoception, which we mentioned briefly before. And it's, again, that ability to sense what's happening inside of us. So one of the tests of interoception that there are is called the heartbeat test. And in this type of test, we just ask individuals to estimate their heartbeat without monitoring it with, say, like a heart rate monitor. And the closer that your estimation of your heart rate is to your actual heart rate, the higher your interoceptive scale is. And a study has been done with it in 2017 that found that yoga and dance movement therapy both increase interoception. So the main power in movement is that piece of interoception, the fact that movement strengthens the feedback loops between the body and the mind. So the mind can then go and directly communicate with the body, and the body can communicate back with our mind. So we understand that when we have stomach pain, we can then act on it. When it comes to movement in general, when it comes to activating the higher level pieces of the mind, we're talking about increasing working memory and increasing attention, and also inhibiting negative thoughts. So if we're sitting in a meditation, or if we're sitting in an uncomfortable position in a yoga class, and we're able to work through it and not get out of it and stop those thoughts saying to us, I'm bored, maybe I should do something else, then we're practicing mindfulness skills in that manner. And that's inhibiting negative thinking. And then we have movement and the body. And this is how movement impacts the lower level brain systems, such as the brainstem. So what we see is that the diaphragm begins to be strengthened, and that overall heart rate begins to normalize. And also something called vagal tone becomes increased. And that's just basically another way to say that the nervous system is being regulated. So our fight and flight response is able to become more flexible. So we can fight when we need to, we can fight when we need to, and we can also relax when we need to. So what we try to teach at South Oaks Hospital is the ability to use the breath and the ability to use the body as a resource, and use movement when we need to be able to communicate exactly what needs to be said in a nonverbal manner.
So here we'll offer you a little bit of information of how we use therapeutic movement groups at South Oaks Hospital. Movement inclusive sessions offer a range of diversity at South Oaks, and these sessions are offered to all age groups and mental health needs during different movement-based time slots in each unit's programming schedules. We consider these sessions multidimensional because the movement sessions highlight one's mental health systems first, and then the processing of the body's responses to one's psychological self next, and then offering empowering activities to promote independence and connectedness. We also consider them a multimodal approach as we offer different inclusions of art, music, writing, physical exercise, and even team building, to name a few additional interventions. And we also have the luxury, we brag about it a little bit, we have the luxury of a designated movement program space in our activities building with a beautiful mural painted by one of our talented art therapists, Emily Smith. So now not only do we have this built into programming, but then we get our own beautiful space. Thanks for that. And here now we've broken down some of the effects really of COVID-19 on our programming. Here on the left, we offered a list. Specifically, spatial restrictions emerged where patients were unable to leave their units to go to our beautiful program space that we have. And it's even been a challenge to honestly socially distance them on these units themselves. Several of our hospital programs had shut down, specifically our substance use programs, detox and rehab, and outpatient psychiatric services as well for a long period of time, as these individuals were still active out in the community, but then they were also a greater risk for contracting the virus. The different materials and props that we utilized were limited, as we were concerned to share them really amongst the patients with the lack of sufficient cleaning supplies, but also out of fear of transmission. Mask mandates were put in place. So we can see that as a positive element in a way that it was meant to lessen the curve, of course, of the virus, but it did then incite additional stressors for the patients who were greatly suffering from their mental health symptoms, and then decreased impersonal emotional connection. And lastly, here we highlight the mind-body connection and fear of COVID. So there was obviously increased worry about experiencing symptoms and then addressing barriers between mental and physical health awareness. So that spiked even more so. But here on the right, as a silver lining we tried to identify was really the pros of this pandemic within our work. So body awareness really forced participants to be vigilant about their physical symptoms, and then challenging of their reality, whether this was anxiety induced, was this actually a physical response? So this really increased the awareness piece. Group participation increased as social interactions were highly encouraged to be decreased outside the hospital. So the opportunity then to connect in treatment was more greatly received. Then there was also more investing time into restoration, so really healing from the inside out. The pandemic forced us all to pause or slow down. So more time was really available to many participants to invest in focusing on important internal responses that they experienced, and then how they are communicated, not only within ourselves, but externally. And lastly, which Nicole and I speak about, which really put us on the map even more, was that there were more realistic opportunities now for the use of movement. So our routines, we know, drastically changed, and now movement activities were embraced as a more realistic and then beneficial tool post their hospitalization.
So on this next slide here, we have a video. It was a film that I had created back in April during the height of the pandemic. And it's a bit of the parallel processing between both facilitating a group and also experiencing what the patients are going through. So as in general, both group leaders and the group members were experiencing the pandemic and the stress. There are 4 themes that I tried to highlight here, and it's the one theme is the dynamics of emotion regulation. And you might see that through the movements that I chose. So some of them are about the back bending and the expansion, and then others are about the contraction and the making myself small. And it's meant to highlight the flow between one feeling and then next. And in a vinyasa class, that's exactly what happens. If you're familiar with the vinyasa lineage of yoga, we do flow, and the point of the flow is to counteract the freeze. The next theme is the silencing of experience, and you'll see that with the mask that I'm wearing. So the whole mask was supposed to symbolize that. The next theme is relationships and boundaries. You might notice I don't have a mat in the video, and that's supposed to symbolize the fact that my body is acting as the boundary, and by setting firm boundaries, we're teaching a therapeutic skill. Lastly, the mind-body integration. So the video starts with the chair, and then it goes into the more advanced yoga poses. And so this is meant to show the progress of mindfulness skills over time.
Bear with us for just a second. We're going to see if we can bring this to the beauty of full screen. Okay. Okay.
Maybe, just maybe, I'll come home. stories of mine. So there won't be no feeling in the firelight, hoping this will be right. Know your worth, child. I remember over stubborn shit, that's no way to be living, kid. The angel of death is ruthless. And I'm always thinking summertime with the bikes out, pushing our luck getting wiped out. Days were nothing but laughing loud. Underneath my coat, when you tap my shoulder, hold my hand. Nights were nothing but dark, and there you could be my armor then. Island smiles and cardigans, the nights that we've been drinking, and we're here to help you kill all of this hurt that you've been harboring. Confession should be better planned alone than that I'm surely damn. Run away, not understanding. What's important is this evening I will not forget. Purple, blue, orange, red, these colors of feeling. Give me love, I put my heart in it, and I think about it all the time. Lights went out, you will find your kind of struggle not to shine. I still love you though, I still love you though, I still love you always. So hold me when I'm home, keep the evenings long, crack and break apart ways. I still love you though, I still love you though, I still love you always. Give me moonlight and a smile from you that I can barely believe.
Beautiful. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.
My last challenge will be getting the slide back up. I think if we go to present. Nice.
So here we have the movement and the community resources that we can all access. YouTube we put up, and we're all familiar with it, but it is a good resource. There's thousands of things out there. And if you don't like one thing, there's always others to go to. So when it comes to yoga specifically, especially on the island, we have the Always at Home yoga studio and the Free Yoga Project. Both the Always at Home and the Free Yoga Project put up online platforms during the pandemic, and they were free between, I believe, March and June. Always at Home was available multiple times a day through Zoom to participate in yoga. It's still available. I believe you have to put a donation now, but it was nice to have that because before the pandemic, we did not have anything online. We might have, but it was limited and it wasn't free. So this allowed the Long Island yoga community to access a platform without needing to go into Long Island studios. Free Yoga Project, the website's up there, freeyogaproject.com, I believe it was down for a couple months, but I believe they're gonna put it back up and it will be free again for yoga. Liberation Prison Yoga is New York based as well, and it's trauma-informed yoga, but I don't believe that one's free. I think it's donation-based as well. So then there's meditation resources. Brown University has a couple. I believe they're free. And then Meditate Together is 24 hours a day, 5 days a week, and it's constant meditation courses to go on to.
Mm-hmm. And then also, Nicole, I think you said if you found something also incorporating Tai Chi here at the top.
Yes.
And then, yeah, and then below is one of our local studios here in Seaford. There are opportunities to different creative arts therapies workshops that are offered. I believe some at a clip of maybe 4 sessions or so. They are safely socially distanced in person, but then there are also opportunities to do things via Zoom as well by request. And then another studio, it's called Dance On. You can find it online. It's called danceonli.com. It is more out east, I believe, in the Patchogue area. And they offer all classes, for those 18 and over, for fitness classes, dance technique classes, and everything is done via Zoom. So they've really also expanded their resources too, just understanding that even if you're a former dancer or not, it's just the inclusion of music and an opportunity for self-expression is so important. So they are also a new resource as well.
So we wanted to end our presentation with a yoga gesture, Namaste. It's something we're all familiar with. When it comes to the actual word namaste and breaking that down, nama means bow, and then stay is to you. So translated, it means I bow to you. And another way to put that is I honor the light within you. And so when we in yoga use that gesture, we do literally bow to one another with our hands at our chest, similar to this picture. And it shows that mirroring quality and community and being able to empathize with one another. And during the pandemic, the community and being able to find a community, especially through movement and the way that we express in our bodies, was important. So with that, Satira Sukham Asana. May you move with steadiness, may you move with ease, and namaste.
Namaste. Thank you, everybody. So now I believe we have a few minutes at the end. If anyone has any questions for us while we're here, you can enter them in the chat. I'm so glad to have offered you some of this information today, and thank you so much for being with us.
So we do have about 10 more minutes.
Yes.
There was some comments while Nicole's video was on saying beautiful, great job. The presentation was great.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And also we have our contact information. I loved to end on that image. I did forget about this. If anyone ever has any questions just about resources in the communities, we can expand on as well. Even any questions about our work, different facilities that we work with, work at, and our experience as well. We have attached our contact information, so please feel free to reach out. We would love to explore this with you more.
There's a comment here. Thank you so much for this presentation. Gave more weight to the importance of utilizing movement for self-expression. Another comment, awesome presentation. I've included chair yoga and movement. I have so much respect for movement and connecting embodied expression.
And Nicole and I were so proud to bring this to everyone today as well, because this is not something that is necessarily so widely known, you know, whether it's people know about yoga and people know about dancing, but this just really offered just even more extensive information to the history of its development and now how impactful it can be during a worldwide pandemic, which is such a parallel process for so many of us. So thank you for highlighting some of that, everybody.
I don't know if you feel like going off share and opening up the community to see if anybody has anything they want to speak about.
Let's see if I can do that.
Yes,
If I can, that would be great.
Okay, anybody have any questions, responses?
I had a question. The graphic that you put up at the very beginning that had all of the emotions with the bodies where people had put in the color of where they felt that emotion. Is there more information where you guys got that? I think that could be turned into a great art therapy.
So that was a study. It was done, I believe, in 2013. I got the slide from the actual picture from a book by Peter Levine. He's the developer of somatic experiencing. The study I do have in the references. So if we are able to pull that up, let's see. But basically the study was done with participants in Europe and East Asia. And it was an art therapy project. Let's see. I'm having calibration problems on my end. But
let's see if I can share.
I can pull it up. Okay.
Sure. One more time.
Yeah.
Let me see.
So they had individuals and the participants look at each emotion and then try to draw what was experienced in their own body. And then overall, they took everyone's information and created a computer image of it. And in order to incorporate everyone's, and if they found that the computer image looked similar to everyone's descriptions of what the emotion was experienced in their body.
Sure.
Are you able to pull it up, Ryan?
Yep. And you can then just tell me how to navigate a little bit more if I need to.
It's slide 7.
Okay. Is it, let's see, this one?
No, it's under the embodiment section.
All right. Embodiment.
Yeah, the one with all the.
This one. Yep.
Yes.
I love this one. I'm so glad you incorporated this. So here we go.
So they had different emotions, and then individuals colored in the emotion within their own body, and then they took a computer image of it. So this is what it looked like. And it just gave insight into the fact that emotions aren't just mental, that we actually experience them in our body. And whether it was Europe or East Asia, we experienced them very similarly.
Perfect, thanks.
There was a request for the screen for the resources as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And there was a question, what were the feeling of your clients during the movement sessions during this time? What did they say about how it made them feel?
So for yoga, a lot of times we get initially a feeling of discomfort, because many times when there is stress in our lives, we kind of disembody and we fragment from the actual body and the feeling that we're having. We might not be able to sense our emotions as well. So then we add the element of mindfulness in, and now we're aware and we begin to feel everything. And it might be uncomfortable for people. And that's where in groups, we try to encourage the skill of distress tolerance and learning to sit with that emotion and be able to process it in a different light, and asking ourselves, now that we have that emotion, how can we investigate it? And what questions can we ask about that specific emotion? And from there, what can we do now to nourish ourselves? And what is this emotion specifically asking of me? So, and from there, usually individuals throughout the course of a couple of weeks or a couple groups that they do become a little bit more comfortable with yoga. At the inpatient level, it's more of an introduction to yoga, because they're not with us for an extended period of time. But the hope is that they go, and even if they're not taking yoga classes, they appreciate the experience of connecting the body and the mind and what it does in terms of our psycho-emotional state.
And even in my perspective too, as the creative arts therapy side of movement, I was welcomed surprisingly with such an interest in being playful. And a quote comes out in my mind of a patient's experience to say, I'll do anything. If you want me to shake around, if you want me to run around, I'll do anything to help me get through this and to help me shake this feeling, this worry of, impending COVID and if I'm going to get it, when am I going to get it? So there was such a welcoming of openness, really, to try to explore something that's outside of comfort zone, really, like Nicole, you highlighted too. It's not something that everyone is so readily willing to do. So for me, and it took time to get there, granted, now we've almost been here a year, but for me, I was so pleased to see that willingness to be playful and to just detach almost and just be in one's body. So it's great.
There's another question. How do you think Zoom fatigue or general screen fatigue impacts mindfulness, embodied movement? Can it be combated?
Yeah, so it definitely does. Yeah, even when yoga studios were moved online, we had the issue of, like, in the yoga studio, you take a class and then the teacher would play music, but to try to play music through a screen, especially you guys saw the film, the audio kind of gets screwed up. So when it came to, we had to modify in so many ways. In terms of Zoom fatigue, I do know that it definitely, I think we've all experienced that over time, attention kind of goes elsewhere, and that there's so many things popping up at once. But in terms of running groups, we run them with the person face to face.
Right. So that was a luxury that we did have in such a stressful situation, is to have that in-person contact. That's why people were really coming to groups more commonly. But right, with the computer, there's a disconnect, right? We like to prioritize that organic feeling, an authentic feeling of movement. And when there are so many barriers, it almost feels like in between. Yes, it's a way to connect, but that's still a little bit of, separation for feeling energy in the same space. So I personally myself had to take breaks. I missed my friends, I missed people, but I needed Zoom breaks myself. And the screen time, it takes a whole different level of attention to engage yourself. So time away was important too, breaks.
Great. I think we have one more minute, so I want to take the time to thank you, and it was a great presentation. I think everybody got a lot out of it. And now we all have to, after sitting here, have to go stretch and do some yoga.
Zoom fatigue, yes.
Yes, a little bit of Zoom fatigue.
Great.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here. Thanks.